On February 2nd, 1959, a group of 9 hikers died in the Ural Mountains in the Soviet Union, which remains one of Russia's biggest mysteries. Um, some popular theories are that it was an avalanche, a Yeti attack, or a nearby military test with explosives that forced them to flee their tent into the sub-freezing wilderness with little clothing. Do you know what really happened to them?
From the options you're representing, the latter, yes,
Uh huh.
seems the most accurate. Military experiments, barracks were, but to some degree was also intentionally targeted at those individuals that were nearby, so they're chased off, so to speak, not an accident. So in other words, the government itself might have documents on the incidents that does not entirely make it a mystery like to outsiders.
So why was the government targeting them?
They were likely simply too nearby.
Um, Nearby what? Why did the government care that they were in the area?
As the area, well, as you are in the American region of your planet, right?
Right.
You could perhaps link this to some of your own military projects here somewhere in the desert, yes?
Uh huh.
Where the government does not like individuals going too near there. However, in the Soviet Union idea there was also another aspect to this, there a different idea of the civil liberties or rights, correct? So they had an easier time doing with the citizens whatever they wish. So there was not so much their idea that should be there, but just let's get rid of them if they're making any problems, yes?
Uh huh.
They're likely seeing something they're supposed to see.
Okay.
However, their ideas also was a coincidence. There was also something like a planned idea of experimenting on those individuals with some technological gadgets the government was likely working on, at least from what we are picking up.
Okay. Um.
Nothing particularly sophisticated, but obviously enough to get rid of those papers.
Right. So about that photo I showed David, from one of their cameras, showing a dark humanoid figure stepping out from behind a tree. Do you know what this is? Is it a Yeti?
Also likely a result of experimenting from same forces we mentioned earlier. So it depends what you're calling such. It's not like there's this one race called Yeti. Many individuals from Eurasia have interpreted numerous peoples as Yeti or Bigfoot or whatever, yes.
Uh huh.
But the same as you're calling certain beings cranes or reptiles or Nordic aliens, etc., yes. Well, in reality, you're very often faced with numerous phenomena of different species and races you just pigeonholed, so to speak, yes.
Right. So I mean, what was this being in that picture?
Likely a result of a certain experiment with genetic engineering from your own governments.
Okay. Uh.
Or something was designed intentionally to look like such by
So
said governments.
do you know what caused the 9 hikers to cut a hole in their tent and run out into the woods? I mean, was it like just explosions from the government, or like did it have anything to do with the Yeti attack?
They were intentionally scared.
By what, a Yeti or just explosives?
Both. Well, depends what you're considering a Yeti. Peoples that were escaping from certain experiments, yes. But mainly from weapons that were targeted entirely in the area that included explosions. So the main cause was likely the nearby presence of military, yes. But there's more to it than just an explosion going off. But from what we're picking up, there was not a Yeti attack by a wild creature like a bear attack or something like that, yes?
So are you saying it was kind of more like, I don't know, the government released a Yeti and sent it after the hikers?
That's likely how it appeared to them, yes.
Okay. Um, Now, the last photo on one of their rolls of film just shows strange lights. Do you know what these are?
It's not like you can see through the eyes of the people that saw whatever they took a photo of, but likely it was also related to whatever groups or military troops approached them at this particular moment, yes? Again, they were intentionally scared off, so whatever was brought forward to them was likely made to look as scary as possible to let they send them running for the hills and their entire certain death, so to speak, yes?
Okay.
Also, the weather played a certain role. You're calling this HARP, we believe, yes? But it wasn't entirely just this project in this particular region. Numerous governments are playing with similar projects in a long period of time.
Okay. Do you know why two of the hikers had missing eyes and one had a missing tongue? Did the Yeti eat these?
Again, what you're considering a Yeti is unlikely what you're calling such, but yes, they were removed, but more likely violently by one of the personnel there. It could also be that the individual was tortured, weren't certain if what he was being eaten, but yes, the creature, whatever it was, likely took them out.
Okay. So, I mean, can you elaborate on what the creature was? Like, you don't like the term Yeti. I mean, was it similar to a Yeti?
Yes.
Okay. So, all right. Another question. So, shortly before the hikers were killed, the Soviet government set up a group called the Snowman Commission, which had the mission of capturing a living Yeti. Do you know if this had any connections at all to the so-called Yeti attack on the hikers?
Yes, it did.
In what way?
They were successful, so to speak, or some of this was their own project and ran off.
Can you elaborate?
Depends what direction you wish to take this. Your own governments had made similar ideas with the so-called Bigfoot idea, yes? Certain experiments that went on missing, so to speak, yes? Or some were intentionally released in the area, yes? This one obviously ran off, was released at those what you consider hikers, and then were recaptured.
Okay. Do you know if this Yeti is still alive today?
Likely, yes. If not this individual, then one others that were related to the same experiment.
Okay. Do you have any idea how they captured it? I mean, like, did they use a tranquilizer gun or something?
Likely a net. It's not like those creatures are particularly sophisticated.
Okay. So why did the government keep it a secret? I mean, this was like the year after Sputnik. Why didn't they brag like, hey, we're the first to capture a Yeti. Suck on that, America.
It's likely those was related to engineering experiments that they did not intend to let out. Besides that, United States government likely had similar experiments going on. Just like with your space race, they also collaborated on most of those.
Okay. So while we're on the topic, do you know if China or India or Nepal have captured any Yetis?
China certainly. We are certain of the others.
Okay. You said last time that the hikers were too nearby someplace where the government didn't want them to be, and they saw something they weren't supposed to see. I mean, like, what was so special about this area? Was it like the Soviet Union's equivalent of Area 51 or something?
Well, not literally equivalent, but something like it. It was secret. It was shrouded in secrecy for the same reason your so-called Area 51s. Yes. Now,
Okay.
military programs are you're aware and you're played usually somewhat guarded, correct?
Uh-huh.
So in this case, there being simply experiment, what you are perhaps reverse engineering going on, right?
Okay.
So in this case was similar. And there's perhaps a moral codex that made it easier for them to get rid of such trespassers, but really your own government does the same, they're just giving it another justification. National security, etc. You're aware of such, right?
Right.
Similar in this case.
So was it kind of like there were extraterrestrial crafts there, or just like flying saucers that the Soviets had built? Or something totally different?
Some of those were from the vessels reached and were being tampered with, yes, rearranged, etc. What you considering re-engineering or reverse engineering, right?
Uh-huh.
Some of those might have had extraterrestrial influence. We're uncertain if it was indirectly or if the Soviets also directly downed the craft and had that one also in their possession. They were certainly building their own ones at the time, but we're not quite certain how far they were at this particular juncture of their development. It's not like they're keeping cameras with every hair and spank on Earth.
So was there an actual like military base in that area?
Correct, that's what you're sharing.
Okay, so like did the hikers actually see this military base or flying saucers or anything like that, or is it just that the government didn't want them anywhere near the area?
They're likely aware of there was such some secluded area or military nature, but it's unlikely that they saw any ET crafts or anything out of the ordinary. But they would likely have if they were allowed to trespass further.
Right, I got you. Now, what did you mean about the Yeti type of creature being a genetic experiment? Was it something that was genetically engineered and grown in a lab, like from an embryo, or was it just a creature that was captured from the wild and had some of its genes modified?
Most likely the latter, but to a degree that was nothing comparable to anything that roams naturally in the world. Also remember some of the earlier hominids, right, that you were from on your planet, were created in similar fashion. Just as your own species, your numerous human so-called races are nothing but the remnants of genetic experiments, and some just went awry and were just allowed to roam around. We did our own prior to the genocide idea you're aware of, yes?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And afterwards, obviously, once your government cracked the code, so to speak, they started doing similar experiments. In your ancient Egypt, there are also still some of those recordings of such or remnants of such experiments that roamed about. So it was much similar to that, just with another level of technology.
So what genes specifically were the Soviets experimenting with? I mean, what made this different from just an ordinary Yeti?
Well, depends what you consider an ordinary Yeti. There's just something from your modern mythology. There are numerous creatures you've termed Bigfoot or Yetis, right?
Right.
Just you're calling beings that are crazy or reptiles or Nordic aliens, right? In your so-called ufology, where you're referring to numerous species, you just pitch in all this way to make it easier for your ego-conscious mind, wherever you wish to go, to interpret such vastness as exists in space, including the vastness that exists on your own planet, when there are certain experiments that were sent off. Again, not just the ancient Egyptians, but also other experiments, including the Atlantean region. Central Africa has certainly had some experiments going on as well, and certainly in the Arctic regions, and then some of them just survived and just went roaming about. And some of them were again captured by governments. Then they were also tempered with their genetics to turn into something else here again, or to try to get them more intelligent, more from your species would deem intelligent, yes. No offense, but it's something else than we would now. Of course, there were also experiments with animals that to some degree were assigned to create perhaps what you could say like chimeras.
Okay. But again, do you know which genes in particular they were experimenting with? I mean, were they trying to make it smarter or stronger or something?
As we said, smarter likely. Yes, increase the intelligence.
Okay. I mean, why did they care if it was smarter? Were they trying to weaponize it or something?
Well, again, we are keeping tabs on all single individual speculators, but the likelihood from the government's perspective was that yes, there could be some weaponization from this project, not necessarily they try to equip a Yeti, yes, or they used to call it with a machine gun as an arm or something like this, yes. More than an idea that they conduct the experiment to see what's even possible in this realm, right?
Right.
Also could interact with the species or where a creature it was, yes, and turn to something else.
Okay. Now, the Soviet Union's they set up a group called the Snowman Commission just a few months before the deaths of these 9 hikers. And like the group, like they had sent an expedition to the Pamir Mountains, which today is kind of between Afghanistan and China, like kind of north of the Himalayan mountains a little bit. in order to search for a Yeti. And officially, they said that like they weren't able to find anything. But do you know if well, like you had said last time that the Soviets captured a Yeti. So do you know if it was during this expedition around like 1958 or 1959 when they captured the Yeti, or was it years earlier?
It was likely earlier, but again, just because it happened one time doesn't mean it didn't also happen another what you consider time.
Right.
And right here, let's chime in. Your creation of the past, as you shared earlier, also depends on your perception of it.
Right. So another question, like, do you know if the creature was somehow, I don't know, like mind controlled by the government? I mean, how did they get it? How did they instruct it or whatever to attack the hikers?
Well, it's intellectually somewhere between a wild animal and perhaps what you consider one of your native tribes, right? So it's not that difficult to psychologically manipulate an entity of such a nature, right? If they would release a wild bear, it would probably not be too hard to have it attack those peoples either, correct? So it's not like it just needed a certain sophisticated technological apparatus attached to it or something like it.
Okay. And you'd also said like the government was experimenting with the hikers, testing some gadgets on them that weren't particularly sophisticated. Do you have any idea what gadgets in particular they were testing?
Well, electronical applications that were attached to the being to some degree. Obviously, yes, we attempt to weaponize it, right? Others, for what you today might consider perhaps transhumanism, or in this case, trans-Yetiism, right? The idea to have electronical apparatuses attached to a biological entity, which at that time was, believe it or not, still somewhat revolutionary concept, even in secret. Nowadays, you obviously have it as an open concept or rather a novelty, when in reality it's quite old by now. Also, certain applications that were infringing with its brain capacity to activate certain regions of the brain, deactivate other regions to also have it function somewhat like an intelligent robot.
Okay. But like what I meant is like last time you said the government was wanting to test some gadgets on the hikers. I mean, is that what you meant? Just some gadgets they had installed in the creature?
No, those were rather frequency what you consider waves, right? Like microwaves, electromagnetic waves, those ideas, right? There are many such for which there are still working vessels binding and certainly fine, but the government certainly got some of those from reverse engineering, yes. Some of them were euphemistic and termed death rays, right? Or it was likely not something nearly as strong, but it was likely a form of mild weaponry, or another way they tested was rather mild. But, for example, certain rituals in the world close to be targeted with certain technology, especially those like the vessel, that are opening up to something like beings outside their own consciousness, and it's like somewhat like a what you're calling those not a lighthouse, but a light that shines on the sky, right?
Yeah, I don't know the word either.
Your clubs, etc., correct? Or
yes.
your airfields.
Spotlight.
Correct, the spotlight.
Yeah.
That's somewhat an energetic spotlight that's being shown out. So once you're going to pick some of those, they can also easily target such areas if it's open enough with something that's like a mind reading or sometimes interfering technology, for example. Yes. Obviously, you also have EMP weaponry, etc. Yes, EMP can also go off when you have nuclear weapons, but it can also be used single-handedly, so to speak, right? And again, there are those milder versions that just can deactivate also certain capacities you have in your brain. But at this time, what you consider right time, yes, they were just conducting early experiments and didn't know much of what they were doing either.
So they were just kind of testing with the minds of the hikers?
Yes. Well, they're testing technology and see what would happen since they were in the region.
Right. Okay, very interesting, Kalask. I know this topic is of no importance to you guys, but I mean, to me, it's really interesting. So, yeah, cool. Thanks for answering all my questions.